Today's topic is going to be on enhancement of human being in perspective of personhood, ego. Very important topic. It's going to be complicated. So I'm going to, Rishi, you can mute all, okay? Then we will entertain some questions at the end of it if we can get out within an hour or 45 minutes. So I'm going to review last few weeks a little bit. The whole thing was, how do we enhance human being in terms of body, mind, and also a special section on how to deal with the electronic world. And then today we're going for the personhood, that's the ego. So I'm going to start with this saying of the gist of what I'm talking about in the long run. This is going to be a complicated slide, but I'm going to go, I have tried to highlight and everything, but it should be easy for you to understand. Okay, see, the essence of mind is only consciousness, So what happens is we get the ego, and that ego blocks everything else, because when it is the ego we identify, it functions the consciousness as reasoning, sensing faculty. So we get lost to what we are, which is the consciousness, and then the cosmic mind being separated from you really by the ego, you are functioning as ego. But in the cosmic mind, when the ego is not there, there is nothing separate, only awareness. So just remember that. That is what Bible also said, I am that I am. And in Vedas, they said, I am Brahma or Tattvamasi and all those things, okay? I will come back to the slide at the end of it so that you will understand what I'm talking about. Even if you understand that, bringing that in the daily life is the paramount importance. That's where I think all your stress, all your productivity, everything is affected by who you are, or you're the ego or the awareness. So this ego has several definitions, both in the Western world and also Eastern world. In the, just I thought, or I am, or I-ness, those are all different things in Western world. But in the Eastern world, it's like a asmita or ahankara. I will go into them a little bit now. So if you take the Western way, this slide shows ego, a person's sense of self-esteem or self-importance, or self-worth, self-respect, self-conceit, self-image, self-confidence, so many things, And the psychoanalysis is the part of the mind that mediates between the conscious and the unconscious, and is responsible for reality testing and a sense of personal responsibility, okay? Not responsibility, identity. In the philosophy, a conscious thinking subject. So the modern definition of ego is really doing its job, but if you take it too seriously, because human beings are not just their ego, but what is behind that ego, people get lost in the ego and get into trouble. So is it a friend or an enemy? It's a friend when it is used for the purpose, but it's an enemy when it is dominating you, or it is inflated to such extent that you cannot really identify who you are. That's the problem. I'll show you the consequences. This is Eckhart Tolle, which we're going to talk about him a lot, a little bit later. He always talked about how we made a mistake thinking that we are the thinking. We are identifying with the thought, And that's why we are kind of getting into all sorts of troubles. And he himself, I will tell his story when his slide comes up, he had really identified with his true sense of self. So he defined ego is a false sense based on mental concept. And is identified mainly with the body-mind complex. So if you remember that, from body-mind complex, if you go to awareness, awareness owns the body-mind complex. But if the body-mind complex is so dominant as an ego, then you are not in touch with yourself. That's where all the stress happens. So it's actually the persona that came from the Italian word, which is called mask. They used to play the dramas. The actors wore this mask of the character, and then they acted. From that, this personhood or personality that has come up. Now, you can have a personality to get things done. But if you identify yourself with that mask or personality over your real self, then you are really subjectively losing yourself. You may do things very well, but if you identify with them, like the body-mind complex or your whatever position or whatever role you have, then you are not complete. That's the problem. So it's a identity of our own construction. So which is actually an identity of a construct that has come out, which is not really you. That's the point of this slide. It's an identity which is false. Like, for example, somebody is a teacher. He has a role as a teacher, but he is not that teacher person. He is some much more than that. He may be something else. He may be a musician. He may be a parent or son, whatever it is. But they're all roles. But underneath all, what it is there is the personhood is only identity. Beyond that, the conscious entity is us. Say, like Einstein defined ego more like a, well, it is inverse relation with knowledge. The more you know, the less is your ego. And then the less of the knowledge, the more the ego. Actually, that's what we say. People who have a lot of knowledge are very humble. And people who know a little bit, they want to project as though they know a lot. And then they come out like they're aggrandizing themselves. And you can easily identify that. But the problem with this ego is when you are having an inflated ego and you forgot that that's just my personhood, I'm not that, then your creativity will go down. Obviously, productivity will go down, and then your business will go down too. That's one practical aspect. Other thing is serious relationship. Take, for example, they studied all the divorces that are going on right now. They identified into broad category. That is where it is young people, they are relating with each other with their mind, not with their heart. So they have problems of ego clashing with ego. And then the relationship is not there because they are looking for things to be done by the partner rather than what they can do for them in terms of heart, friendship, in terms of love and affection and all that. So these are all gone because they're equating to this like a business partner. You have to do these jobs for me before I can be nice to you. So women used to be like a guardians of the relationship. They were really coming to the relationship with a heart. But now they are also making a lot of money or qualified and all that. I'm not saying they should be subservient to the men. But what I'm saying is that femininity that was shown in the nurturing person has eroded somewhat. So they are having their own problems of nurturing themselves or their family. And the men were never trained to nurture people. And they want everything from the girl in the terms of nurturance. When the egos are there, there is no heart. And that's why a lot of divorces are happening. I am for women's liberation. I am for equality of women. But what I'm saying is this particular aspect of ego in women has really grown without them knowing, or they are trying to adapt to the society. That's a big problem in the society right now, okay? This is something I always used to say in the meetings. When I go to the meetings, I used to joke about this, like park your egos at the door. And they all kind of looked at me thinking, what is this? But then that means you are not going to come across from your ego. So one tactic was listen to everybody, especially in the beginning of the meeting. And I used to speak at the end of it, because by the time I heard everybody's perspective, and then I can put it all together, maybe change some other things that I have already concluded. I can change them because somebody else has presented a better viewpoint. So when asking them, just park your egos at the door, was significant. Down the line they understood that we need to come together, not with exerting our ego, but seeing the common benefit of the hospital. Like for example, a orthopedic surgeon, obviously with his surgeries, he used to bring in a lot of revenue. So whatever he wanted has to go, but that clashed with somebody else directly. But he was pushed aside, like a hospitalist group was pushed aside because this orthopedic person was so important to get the revenue. And then they didn't really cooperate very well. They gave him problems down the line. Okay, so that kind of thing we noticed. But then when they really put their ego aside, the orthopedic person cooperated with the bigger interests of the hospital, things went very well. This is from the Torah, the Jewish text. They do not want the ego to be destroyed, but understand that it is created with a divine purpose. That divine purpose is not your selfish purpose, but you have to understand why that was given to serve the society, to serve other people. That means you cannot be egotistical, megalomaniac. You have to be a servant leader. So the God made this ego for a divine purpose. The question is, are we using that? And then with the overthinking about themselves is also a big problem. Just to overthinking on things is a problem, but if you overthink about yourself, there's a bigger problem. Now, this one is a French philosopher, Rene Descartes. The people who heard me in my previous talks, I talked about him too, because this is a fact that happened. He is the one who coined the term, I think, therefore I am. It has gone to that extent where people have identified with whatever thinking they have. But you can see the thinking you have as a youngster has changed to something else as you grow up, right? So you have to identify very early where is the thinking fitting in our lives. If it occupies too much, then you will forget who you are, which is the one who is thinking. There's somebody there thinking, right? That faculty is the consciousness that is you. I'm going to strive to show you how to identify that who you are and then operate from there. So he never said, okay, there is something beyond thinking, but there is that consciousness. Eckhart Tolle was talking about, he stopped too early. He should have waited, then he would have said, I am conscious, therefore I am. But the ego development is needed because when you're young, when you want to get up and walk and survive just for the physical sake, and also some livelihood acquisition, some skills for that, all that the ego is needed. It is the understanding the role of the ego and growing out of it, because when you bring the ego in terms of value compared to other person, and then you want to be more than the other person, that's when you get into trouble. Okay, so when you are in the ego, obviously you are not in your being, in your consciousness, which is the being. And that's where a lot of people gets ill-treated. The ego says something, it is, your ego hurt means basically your being is the hurt. And that's why you are having so much stress at work, because nobody cares about you. They care about your product, how much you have produced. And that's why people are realizing and breeding servant leaders. The leaders are coming across like, I'm going to serve you. I'm going to help you to grow. I'm going to help you to deal with the stress. Those kind of leaders are appreciated, and companies are moving towards that in a big way. You know, of course, the ego consequences are anxiety, depression. Negative way, depression. You worry too much, that is anxiety. Who is that doing it? That ego. I mean, there are practical things that are happening in the working world where people are really unhappy in their work, or they are very happy for a while and somebody comes and pricks their ego and they are very unhappy. But the more consequential thing is, people are having ego in the family. They take their stand and really separate themselves, and the divisions are encouraged, and then people really war in their family, and that goes into the your family, towns and countries. And then in 20th century, they said 130 million people were killed because of this attitude was nurtured in people, in populations, in countries. So, for example, Germany, they thought they are the best race in the world. So Jews are nothing. So they wanted to cleanse their race of these people. Who is that doing it? That ego. So the ego can be from person to the nation can be transferred. So people can argue, even some countries now, they're saying, we're going to be the great country because we want to avoid everybody else. So that kind of divisive, separative attitude is taken by the personal ego and each one, and they are discriminating, they're doing all sorts of atrocious things, and people are reacting to that. So, but you have to understand the ego pattern, how this leads to the eventually wars. That's where the consciousness has to improve. Okay, they have not learned from the history. People came with a promise, we're going to give you democracy, we're going to make everybody equal. And then in a few years, they turned the same thing around. We're seeing this time and again in the history. Why people are not learning from that history? Because so many wars are going. This is my friend Eckhart Tolle. he was uh, very depressed when he was very young. He was so depressed to the point, one day he said, I'm going to kill myself. And that has become his thing for a while. He was so down in the dumps, he wanted to do that. I'm going to kill myself. Then suddenly he realized, who is this I that is telling that I should kill myself? Then he snapped out of it. And the next morning, he was completely out of it because he identified that was just a thought. There were no two of me. That thought come and going, and I'm holding on to thought. That's why I'm staying there. The moment he himself identified that it was just a thought, he got out of it. Then he stayed in that conscious being in the morning, and everything looked completely different to him. From then onwards, he went on to write a very nice book. It's called The Power of Now, and that book is a major bestseller. And then he was invited to appear on Oprah, and from there he kind of worked a big TV program for several weeks with Oprah, and he is said to have liberated millions from their ego in United States. So a lot of people know the power of now and they practice it, and he's still very active on the social media. He has his own TV and all that. And then he comes and speaks. I will tell you how this is working for him. People call him for lectures. He comes in. He doesn't think at all before he comes to the lecture. He just stays in the present. And then he comes and takes the podium. And then everything comes to him from his conscious being. So it's not like something thought out, wrote to speech, and not like that. So that is the universal intelligence touch you have when you erase your ego. All your religious activity, all the personality development, everything is striving to erase that ego. Okay, that's why it's so important. And then he was known to, when he went to several people after that experience, what is that happened to me? Then he understood he was enlightened that day. So he kind of been in the present all along from there. He was on the bench in London because he had no home, everything he lost for 2 years. But because he was in the present, he was not bothered by his fear, should it come for the future, was not there. He never regretted that he had house, he lost all of them. That was not there. So that's how he wrote the book. And then even now he takes people and trains them how to be here and now. Okay. So if that can happen to somebody like a Katoli, it can happen to anybody. But if I talk about ancient yogis and all of that, people think it's a big process, but not really. You got to understand your purpose of human life and then think global and act locally. So in ancient terms, it's called Vesti versus and Shamisti, not versus. Vesti is where you go for your own realization of who you are, that is the being, not the ego. So you have to transcend the ego, but you have to have the detachment from the ego. Okay? And then you got to engage in the welfare of the world. So they did this Vesti Samasti. This comes from the word Vishnu. Vishnu is that he is always immersed in enlightenment, in knowledge, and then he kind of maintains the world, works for the world. So this is an important concept that came into the yoga system, and this is the international yoga statement from India when Prime Minister Modi presented this proposal at the United Nations. He delivered this lecture. This excerpt is from that lecture. In that, apart from all the benefits of the yoga, but basically you have to feel the oneness, not as an Indian, not as an American or anything like that, but you have to feel the oneness of humanity and the nature also. The trees, the rivers, and everything is really, breathing is going through you from the trees. All your blood is from the rivers, like that. You have to really feel the oneness with the surroundings, with the other people and all that. Then there are no others. So that kind of lifestyle that you, instead of blaming something happens, immediately they blame the other person without really realizing these people are also contributing the same attitude, because you are putting others as separate, and then the division causes the wars, So what the purpose of yoga was to make it that all the people are one, have that sensation, and then create a consciousness where the planet is going, why our actions are resulting in climate damage. So that consciousness is elevated. That is the real yoga. Keep your body and mind fine with exercise and meditation and all that, the yoga asanas, meditation, all that. But have the sensation, that oneness of everything. So take, for example, early in the morning, this is the yoga prayer that was encouraged for centuries. Okay, in this, they don't have a particular god, or they don't have any particular religion. Hinduism is not a religion, actually. It's a way of life, okay? So, see, all that says is, may good befall all. May there be peace for all. There's no identification, only Indians or my family or my society, nothing like that, okay? May all be fit for perfection. May all experience that which is auspicious. May all be happy. May all be healthy. May all experience what is good and let no other suffer. So that is the prayer, If you do that in the morning with that sensation, without identifying yourself to a particular thing, then you are in that sense. Then you will carry that through your work. You don't identify black, white, brown, or particular nation, or female, male, nothing. You are one with other. That's a thing that they always, even Einstein, he said, I believe in God who reveals himself in the orderly harmony of the universe. What did he say? He reveals himself in the orderly harmony of the universe. So, and the universe is in harmony. That means human beings have to be in harmony with themselves, with their surroundings, with their family and everybody. Then that harmony is itself is God. All the scientists, by the way, at the end of their work, they come to the spirituality. For example, Kennedy said, what the country can do for me, don't ask that. Ask, what am I doing for the country? That's also old-fashioned now, because if you identify yourself to the country, you are limiting yourself. The thing you have to ask now is, what the world is doing is not that you have to ask. You have to ask, what am I doing for the world? That is the samishti I talked about. They talked about this centuries ago. You work for your enlightenment with detachment, but you work for the welfare of the world. Not just surviving, but that's the purpose of the human life. There was so much discussion on this. The society is doing a lot of harm to me, a lot of things they are creating which are really harming me, not allowing me to grow and all that, But if you really take the society that is striving for the things which is really damaging people and also damaging the planet. Everybody is seeing the destruction we are having with these hurricanes, fires, earthquakes, and all that. So it has been going on even my lifetime from 80s when I came to this country. Even now, I could see the intensity of the storms have gone up. Everybody knows this is the global change. And then because of the temperature has gone up, global heat, and then we are suffering that. But then everybody trying to really adjust to the society that is encouraging things and commercialism and consumerism. And now that is all broken. Now you are blaming everybody else, but then they want to use you as a pawn for their design. So you got to be aware of that. And also, just because you are doing for your personal realization and the welfare of the world, somebody may not agree because they don't have a perspective. Doesn't mean that you don't have the worth. I will tell you an example of what happened in India. This is something I knew, that's why I'm telling you. They had so many fantastic temples and organizations and institutions, but they never put their name on that. I mean, I'm talking about really old temples. People may know this kind of king has supported this temple and they constructed, but they did not put the sculpture, the engineer. But right now, everybody wants to put their name, even if they give a brick to a temple. So everybody is fascinated about what I will get out of recognition from that job, whatever I did or whatever I contributed. So that is ego. Where they were like doing a construction, that's the temple, that's going to help people to realize themselves and then have peace of mind, meditative mind. Those are the purposes of the temples, right? But even though they were doing the noblest work, they don't have the ego to claim, I did this. I will tell you about the karma yoga and what they really mean karma yoga. Once you understand that, you will see they were doing very complicated, intricate structures. Their karmashu kausalam, that means skill in action, was so evident because they don't have an ego obstructing them. So to define what is the real karma is, take a dancer. She is dancing, but real dance is that when you don't see the egoic personality of the dancer is there. Pure dance, where she is not saying, I am doing this, she is in the flow. Like that, suppose you are doing a job, your personality should not be seen there. You are in slow flow with the technique, with the evolution of the project. You should be identifying with that. You are not backstepping to your recognition, to your sensation. That is the I-ness. That is gone, then you are in flow. So a karma yogi really, he does the work, but he has no sense of doership. And also, he is not expecting the fruits at the end of it. What he's focusing on is what is at hand right now. Okay, that is the true karma yogi. So there were so many examples I'm going to bring in. Gandhi, Nikola Tesla, APJ Abdul Kalam, Nelson Mandela, Anthony Fauci, current example, and so many volunteers that come and do. And they do a fantastic work in some of the ashrams that we are seeing, See, basically people want to help somebody also thinking like, oh, I am such a great person, that's why I'm doing so helping. But if you help someone expecting something in return, you are doing business again. You are not involved in kindness. But if you are involved in kindness, you feel yourself how good you feel. Like Gandhi, for example, he never said, I am a freedom fighter or I'm a social worker. Whenever they asked him, he said, I'm a simple man. My goal is to realize God. So that's all he did all life. And then what he said was, I'm going to consult Gita and then let it direct me what I should be doing. Whatever presented to him, he only took that. He has no real long-term plans. He has no plan of becoming somebody in the government or having the power or any of that, you know. So he was so involved in his God, when somebody shot him, he said the name of the God, Ram. But he never had hatred even to the Britishers, because he was conducting a civil strife against them. And then he said, I don't hate British, because he is somebody who accepted everybody is one. So British are his brothers. And he's going to stand up against the injustice they are doing, but he will not hate them. That is the same spirit that other people took over, like Martin Luther King here or Nelson Mandela, that has resulted in not having so much bloodshed. And this is Nikola Tesla. He discovered actually the alternate current, and that was such a breakthrough. Before that, Edison had these generators that you have to use one big generator for one building. With the Tesla technique, you can do one small generator for an entire city. And they try to stop him, they try to pose him as a danger and all that. But actually in his heart, he is a very democratic man. He wanted to make the electric power so democratized. So he wanted to conduct the electricity through the earth so that you don't have to have wires and everything. If you plant something, that will light up there. They didn't allow him because he was not for money. And he let go billions of dollars of contracts without really caring for them. And he was very interested in philosophy and mystical traditions of the world. And he met some of the Indian gurus also, including Vivekananda. So he was a completely different soul. And he was not egotistical at all. He shared everything for the entire world. Of course, Nelson Mandela, we know that he spent his entire life in the prison. Only at the end, he was released. But he never brought violence against the minority of whites. And with this attitude, because he learned from Gandhi and other people, so much of violence was avoided. So again, he was not looking for himself. He was looking for the world. Of course, Anthony Fauci, he is the only person who is telling truth currently. And we are all looking to him to tell what is truth. And he is not intimidated by the surroundings that he is facing. He is always looking for everybody's welfare. Of course, this is a great example. I really venerate this man. So he was president of India. He was a scientist and also a discoverer too. I thought he made a coronary stand for 100 rupees or something. So he was a true example of realized, but at the same time, he is also completely dedicated to the welfare of the society. He is a noble soul. He was also a leader where he did not make the mistake, but his assistant made the mistake and they lost a rocket. But he protects them. He goes to the press, says, it's all because of me. I'm the head of the operation. And he takes all the blame. But when it becomes success, he tells, oh, my team did it. That kind of servant leader he was. And he was very passionate about the kids. And I get emotional when I think about him, you know. And then he was teaching actually when he died right there. So he was such a committed soul for the welfare of everybody. Of course, ego directed for the development of the intellect or realizing the capacity of the intellect, this is the example. But he, Chanakya, he was a great example of, he had a personal base of self-realization. Then he wrote books that are still followed. He wrote a book called Ardha Shastra. So that means his intellect was so high, you know. He's supremely confident too, because he's psychologically freed. I'll tell you, he brought in a commoner and then made him an emperor, okay? And then he himself achieved excellence in an intellect without the ego, okay? He had no self-interest. He wanted the people to be very good. So at one time what happened was, Alexander came to that part of the world and he conquered that kingdom, but he went to see the kingdom. He found all the people are literate. There's no violence and everybody is rich, not only in money, but also in the knowledge. Everybody is literate. Then he was very impressed with the kingdom and he called people and asked, who is responsible for this? They said there was a prime minister and he is the one who is responsible. He wanted to see him. So he sends his soldiers to Chanakya. Chanakya refused to come because he doesn't have any psychological dependence on anybody. You know, he was such a realist soul because he is not controlled by the world forces, you know. That is what happens if you are stationed in the self, not in the ego. He has supreme self-confidence because he can put in an effort without any problem, but he is not influenced by material things or statuses or anything like that. And this is another man I really venerate. His name is Morris Friedman. You know, he is the epitome of how you can be without ego, but contribute significantly to the world. Probably a lot of people don't know him because only people who are very closely following events, they may come to know about him. Otherwise, I also came to know about him only a few years ago. But ever since I came to know about him, he became my idol, like, kind of. So he came from Poland. He was an engineer by profession. So he had a lot of veneration to Gandhi. So he used to read about Gandhi. And then one day he took a train and came to India. There was a Mysore Maharaja hired him to electrify the entire Mysore. And he did a good job. And then he would work for the company, make a big salary, but he would not take the salary. He will give it to the poor people. And then you know what he does? In the evening after the work, he used to go and beg just what he needed for his hunger. But no accumulation of money, no accumulation of economic security, insurance policies, none of it. And then he went to Russia and he told Khrushchev, you are robbing the poor people and taking the money, right on his face. And that was not an easy time for people to say things like that. And then he also advised as a chief technician to a major movie. And the movie came very well because of his input. But after the movie is done, he fought with the people not to put him on the credits. He would not want any credit. He was like that in other. He played a big role in getting Dalai Lama out of that country when the Chinese came and attacked that country, and Dalai Lama was made to flee to India. So he's the one who talked to Nehru, who convinced him and then helped the Dalai Lama to come out. Even now, they are in exile and they are doing their own religion, everything because of what Morris Friedman helped, but nobody heard about that. And also he came to Ramanashram finally, and then he was known for staying there for several years and then learned from him. Then he went to Nisargadatta Maharaj, that's another saint, and he wrote a book called I Am That, which is a spiritual classic. A lot of students read it, and it was known like that. Okay. Of course, Albert Einstein himself, he always talked about how to be, he did talk about, he just showed. One time he said, I don't know what is the big deal they're making out of me. I don't think I feel like that, you know. So everybody thought he's a genius. But when he was very young, they said he's an idiot savant. But that's not it. He's in a beyond the cognitive, egotistical mentality. He is in universal, silent connection with the universal intelligence. So people missed that. He is a wonderful scientist, mathematician, and all that. But there's so much more with Einstein than just the intellectual achievement. So I'm going to go to the ancient wisdom now. So asmita, that is the I-ness, that is what I'm talking about, the ego. That's one of the kleshas. Kleshas are, these are the root causes of all suffering of the humans. One is avidya. That means you don't have the correct insight into things. And then asmita, that is the identification with I-ness. That is the ego we're talking about. So the people who are identified with that, they suffer down the line. And then there is fear of death and also attachment to things and also aversion to things. All those others are kleshas. Each klesha, if you want to explain and then know what it is, how it has come about, takes a lot of time. But basically, asmita means ego, I-ness. Now, why principles of spiritual quotient are important is they give you a perspective that's higher and wider perspective of life. They help you to review your life, because if you are caught up in your ego, you won't have the intelligence to really see where you are going. You are right, you are caught up in that, okay? You cannot decide what is wrong, what is right, because whatever you think, whatever you say is right. You will never have room to think that something can be wrong. And then you cannot change, you cannot heal. So this is again showing what is IQ, what is EQ, what is SQ. Okay, if you have the reasoning and develop intelligent quotient from the sciences, that's fine. But if you study the mind sciences, you develop the emotional quotient, like empathy for other people, understanding other people, how they feel. That is EQ. But the self-knowledge is subjective investigation of who you are. You cannot have subjective investigation when you have a ego that's always looking outward. So they have devised certain ways how to really reverse your thinking into inner direction and look at that subjective awareness, which is Satchitananda, they said, you know. Sat is existence, Chit is awareness, Ananda is bliss. You know? So they have different methods. This is sight, seer, unseen, and your awakeness, dream, sleep, and then you have this 5 layers and, surrounding your real self. And this is the Om, that is the word is called Bija Mantra. That means start of every mantra, it has got 3 sounds, a, u, m. All the 3 sounds are done without moving the tongue. And from that, all the other sounds, all the other words come. From those words, all your activity comes. That's why if you know this particular philosophy that they developed, it was based on Mandukya Upanishad. This is based on everybody's experience every day. Everybody is awake, everybody goes to sleep and dreams, and then goes to deep sleep and they wake up. So you don't have to do anything else. Just examine your day and you will know, okay? So what they said was, okay, you are awake, you are thinking, you are feeling, you are sensing. So body is active, mind is active too. Then you try to sleep. Initially, your body is inactive, but your mind is active. That is the dream state. And then you lose that also. Your body is inactive, your mind is inactive. That is the deep sleep state. Through all these 3 states, you got the consciousness that is pervading when you are awake, pervading when you are dreaming, is there even deep sleep too. So it's not like a 4th state, but through which all those things, states will go. So what is real is the consciousness. All the other 3 states, you have to find that when you are there. This is the 5 layers of yogic anatomy physiology, where you have that inner self around which all these layers. Your hardware is the body, your power is the energy body, and your software is the brain and mind, and your real understanding and all that is the intellect, and then your states of happiness, emotions, your states of sadness, those are the inner layer of bliss. So these all really surrounding the real self. We kind of stop either body or mind, but beyond that people don't go. But in yoga system, you go through this and then you develop an aversion or a detachment to body-mind complex, and they stay in the consciousness. This is again the chakra system, where according to your energies, you will be rooted in those chakras, but ultimately you reach your blissful point, which is your consciousness. This is also another way of looking at it, comparing a rider in a chariot and what the horses, what the reins, what the driver and the person who is sitting there. They're all the same thing as the 5 courses. Now, to realize that awareness, that self, you got to understand your mind. If you don't understand the mind, then you go to identify with one part of mind at any time. Suppose you are thinking about the past or the future, then you are in manas. That's where everything comes up. And then you use your intellect to make decisions for those memories or whatever thing that comes up. That is the buddhi. To do this, you identify yourself with the body and the mind. That is the ahankara. That is the ego. That is the identification. And then beyond all this, there is chit, which is the awareness. So that's a very practical way to look at people, instead of just saying that this particular psychological state is you, rather than this depression is happening to you, rather than you are depressed. So there is a question of even the mind as such exists, or it's only a bunch of thoughts. There is a big debate between the psychiatrists and the philosophers and the sages, because they have overcome the mind. These psychiatrists are rooted in their mind. So they cannot really provide relief for the patients. I'm seeing that. So how does this start is in the morning when you get up with a sense of a thought, and that thought is I thought, I am thinking. And from there, all the other thoughts come up, right? So you are in that I thought rather than awareness, because the I thought is thought by somebody. And who is the somebody? Awareness. So because we are not being aware, attentive to what is happening, our thought takes over and then you fly in that. So what happens is the conscious mind absorbs things, but then they go into a subconscious mind and they come up when you are not realizing. But if you are aware while you are conscious, there is very little chance they can go and hide in the subconscious. So you do something, you complete attention and finish with it, then you dismiss that. That is the deeper states of mind. Otherwise, your mind will be very dull and it will be restless, it will be scattered and preoccupied. But what you want to do is you want to get your concentration together so that you are in flow of whatever you are doing, and then you have mastered your mind that way. So the last two states here, they are saying that you have to make them natural, where you make your thought concentrated and you use that as though that is your property. Okay? So otherwise what happens is all the data that comes from the intellect, ego modifies and turns into states of biological energy in your body. So you want to be controlling the ego or eliminating the ego so that you function naturally. So the practical way is fill up with all positive thoughts all the time. And then that will drive away the accumulation of negative. If you are not aware, attentive to the thoughts that are occurring in your mind, how can you change them? So you got to slow them down and then follow each thought. Breathing is a good way to slow them down. And also this instant gratification that is promoted was very frowned upon in ancient wisdom. They had what's called prayas versus shreyas. Prayas is immediately pleasant, immediately something gratifying, whereas that may not be good for you in the long run. Whereas shreyas is that which is good for you in the long run. So you make, the moment something appears, you make a decision about that and stay away from the immediate attractions to something deeper and long-lasting and good for you in the long run. So if you are in awareness all day, what happens is you don't have any remnants because you are aware and attentive to each task. So you don't have nothing to dream about. Otherwise, you will have dreams. And without the dreams, you have good sleep. So your energy is much, much better. So people are talking about mindfulness, which is attentive. I would say they should be saying awarenessfulness. If they are aware everything that they do, they can see the change for themselves. So pay attention to every action. This is my motto all the time. And also, there is something called, if you want to understand really this phenomena of awareness, you got to understand what is me, what is mine. So if you say, I am so-and-so, I'm male or female, this is my body, this is my mind, these are my thoughts, these are my emotions, this is my name, I belong to this country, a family, or this is my wealth and all that. They all come into this me and mine. So you got to be detached to them because they're all impermanent. They're not going to become with you. This is a slide probably very useful for people. Are you having a voice from your head or from your heart? It's from the head, that is from the ego. But it's tempered by your heart, from the soul, that is the voice that you want to fall back on. Lot of problems will be resolved if you can make the decision. So we'll come back to the last slide that Ramana Maharshi I presented in the beginning. He said the essence of mind is only consciousness. Okay, but when the ego kind of takes over, the consciousness functions as the reasoning, sensing faculty. Then the cosmic mind is separated by the ego. But if the ego is not there, only awareness is there. So you're always there. You don't have to go anywhere. You just have to realize that in the middle of action of life. That's why all those people I cited, they were able to put those selfish things aside, and then they were always in awareness. They're always looking for the welfare of other people. It automatically happens. Okay. This is something all the spiritual people follow. The highest goal of man is to inquire, who am I? And realize the self. It's a human being does not try to realize this, the lives are in vain. But everybody is engaged in just living or getting some things that will not last, and then they are miserable. So transcending the ego is very important, not only for the practical purposes, but also for the purpose of somebody realizing the real happiness. That's all. Thank you.